met today. Her talk is about rapidly prototyping designs with Photoshop, Illustrator, AEM, and PhoneGap. So, ready to go?
Yep, sure am. Okay.
All right.
All right, so let me just share my screen. Right. Get the screen up so we all can see. All right. There it is. Okay. So what screen are we on? Yep. Ah, great. All right. Okay. So let's start. All right. So I'm really excited. Oh, it's not coming up. Oh dear. It's been one of those days actually. It's not mirroring up.
This is not. Yeah, this is weird. Oh, you don't. You want to have your notes here? Is that what
Yeah.
Oh, here.
I had it on. Yeah. It's switched off. Okay, that's.
No, we.
How do we implement them within dynamic applications to create web and mobile apps? So as part of this, I'm going to be talking about the rapid prototyping process with design to mobile and web process, what that looks like now, but also how we want to change that process, make it faster and easier, because it's a really time-consuming process for developers, front-end and back-end, and for designers. So this new innovation we've been playing with is, let me just flick to the next slide, is really around taking our Photoshop designs, as you can see here, and then automating the process between AEM. Now, I think Bruce spoke to you about AEM and showed you some of the AEM capabilities. So AEM, the Adobe Experience Manager, is really a content and data repository where you can then go and distribute your content and data to multi-channels and manage it within that environment. So we've also got PhoneGap integrated into AEM. So one of the key things that the people I go and talk to, and myself working in the industry, I worked as a designer in front end for a long time, is they always bring up the word automation. So how can we automate the process? And that's usually the question they ask us. So there are really two key benefits to automation. The first really is about time. It's really time consuming. So we spend a lot of time, if you think traditionally, I mean, it's been like this forever, since we've been doing this sort of stuff, since the inception of the web. It's a really time-consuming process, but also the resources. I go in and I talk to a lot of people, and there was one customer I spoke to last week, and they were telling me that they have one UX designer, they have one UI designer, they have 4 front-end developers, and and he wouldn't give me a number, he said between 10 and 20, and I took a stab in the dark. I said, let's say 15 back-end developers for one product. All right, so, it's really resource intensive as well. So what we want to be able to do is automate that process. So, and when we talk about automation, what are we really talking about? And when I think about automation, I mean, think of PhoneGap. That's what PhoneGap's done for the community. It's made things more accessible to people to produce their mobile apps, but it's also dramatically sped up the process of how we do it. So when we talk about automation in this context, it's really around removing the redundant coding in this workflow. So, each person in that process, a designer, a developer, and, we always forget the content authors, but they're actually part of that process. It's really allowing each of those people to work within their respective workflows, but to automate how it all comes together. So today I'll be showing you innovation which makes this real. I'll show you how having Photoshop directly integrated into AEM with PhoneGap Enterprise to create a mobile app can really speed up the implementation within a server environment, and it will remove a majority of that coding. So so for me, when I think about rapid prototyping and how do we automate the process, I sort of had to think about, well, what are we really doing, and what does it really mean when we talk about rapid prototyping and rapid application development and that process? And I just like the word rapid, because rapid means fast and timely. And has this ever been the way for you to develop your products and your apps? Has it ever been fast and timely? And talking to a number of people the other few nights at dinner, that's never been the case. So I quite like the way we call it rapid. The process involves a lot of redundant coding, and this is what I used to think about, is why do I have to, basically we're creating this design 2 to 4 times over. So you're designing it in the design tool, you're creating a prototype just to show someone quick, and then you're having to do the production version, and that's at least minimum 3 times, and depending on the changes, and all the rest of it. The other thing as well is designers are restricted with the ownership of the design, and they want to be able to have more involvement in that process, but it's very difficult, especially when it starts to go into that, server environment. And also for developers, they're focused more on the implementation of the front end and the UI, and not on the functional side. So, each has their own workflow. And, for a designer, sometimes they hand off the design to a developer, and that's easy, and then the developer has to do all the other stuff. Sometimes you get from a designer, you'll get, the assets, and you might use a portal sharing tool where you can sort of get the design information out of it. Or like what I used to do the design, and then I used to do a prototype, and then I would do the front end into that server environment myself. And then for a developer, they, focus on the business logic, and they set up the templates, and most of the time they take whatever they can get from a designer, and sometimes they have to be psychic to implement how they think how the designer might think the design might want to work. And speaking to a number of studios, and I used to do this, designers and developers sitting next to each other. Have you ever done that? Your designer and your developer sitting next to each other, and the designer's telling you how to do this, move it here, and all the rest of it. It's a nice relationship, isn't it? In my last role, when I told my back-end developer that I got a job at Adobe, it was the first time I ever saw him smile. But there's also been some great romances that have started this way, and I actually know there was a marriage. I was talking to someone, they married them. So, but it's not efficient. So it's great for relationships, but it's not efficient. And then there's the content authors. So, there's another complexity into that whole process. The content, the authors come, the wordsmiths come along, and then, want to change some of that, within that product, and then you have to go through this whole reiteration again. So it's really, really time consuming. Okay. And that whole environment at which we do this in is a dynamic environment. So, you've got the things like business logic, as part of the product, you've got postbacks, you've got real-time interaction. And the only way to get our design integrated with these highly functional and complex back-end interactions is through wrapping our design around the back-end code. So it's really manual. And I love code. Like, I go into my zone, but this is where the bottleneck occurs a lot of the time. So, this then makes Agile, I think, probably not so Agile. And if we try to work in an Agile environment when we have to do modifications such as functional modifications, design changes and content changes, everyone is working over the top of each other. And although this may be sometimes nice, it's not efficient and it makes the process less agile. And you sort of sometimes have to make compromises and shortcuts to get it delivered or not delivered. Okay. So the last point I want to make before I actually show you how the demo works, I want to show you this, and I'm just putting a caveat on it. I've been trying to negotiate the Adobe Corp Wi-Fi with all this stuff, so there might be some funky things that happen, but I think I've got it mostly working. And this statement may rock the boat a little bit, but you may agree with me, but I believe design and all aspects of what it looks like when it's working and it functions as well, how a design looks when it's moving, etc. That's the designer's domain. And developers who I talk to regularly, they want to focus on core tasks. And with the advancements of, these amazing, CSS, HTML, JS frameworks, all that sort of stuff, and it's really great because it has saved a fair bit of time, but what it's meant is more complexity for the design implementation, and that's really meant designers losing control or more of that ownership of that process. So, designers want to do what they're best at and developers want to do what they're best at. So, there's this crossover, and what we want to do is we want to make this crossover a whole lot smoother. Now, I started out as a designer and I love being creative and I love design. I know developers, I know actually a number of developers who are friends of mine, and they're also really creative in what they do as well. But I learnt to code and do that because of the lack of ownership and restriction over how my design was being implemented. I mean, I love coding, but it takes a lot of time. And there's always too much work to do. So I know from the conversations and each process of, that design and development crossover, the implementation of how we streamline that process is usually awkwardly hacked together to try and connect it. And, when you're talking about trying to connect these processes, it can impact on the design integrity and the functional integrity. And that matters because that builds a better product. And it means the difference between someone using your app and not using your app. Okay, so what I'm going to show you today is something that's really scratching an itch of mine for a long time. It's an innovation. It's not productized yet. We've been playing around with this. I hope you enjoy what I'm going to show you, and I'll take you through it. Okay. We're in Photoshop now. Fabulous. So let's get the view up. And here we go. All right. So let me just pull my layers up. So the process that we have, this is where it starts for a designer. And they come in and they'll add their content. They'll add, their design elements. As you can see here, I've got images. I've got folders with layers with images in it. I've got some text. And this is where, the designer will come in and arrange those on a page, the composition, there'll be styling. But what would usually happen, and this is still happening, is the designer will go up, and you can extract assets, or you can, save for web, for example. And extract that information, put the assets somewhere on a server, the developer picks them up, and then whatever can be written in the CSS in terms of the design is basically redesigned with code. So what we're trying to do is remove that process. So what we've done is we've actually put in a direct integration for AEM with Photoshop. Now, it could be any other of our design tools that we're looking at. So if I go generate for AEM, you can be a UX designer and do some rapid prototyping here like this and use it. Or I can have my complete design and use that too and generate the design, which I'll do here, and take it through. So then what we've now got, if I go across to my browser now, we all know AEM, there's my app. So did you miss that? All right, while I was still talking. So think about how long it actually takes you to make an app with your front end design, and think about how long that took. I timed it, and I think it actually has the seconds up there. It says 25 seconds. I've actually done it in a 4-minute demo, and it said 7 seconds, so you can do it in less. And this is a 2-page design, mind you. But I can go into my app here, and it's all been wrapped with PhoneGap. Okay, so you know it's got all the cool PhoneGap stuff. I can then go into my app, and because we've got PhoneGap Enterprise integrated into our AEM platform, I can go in and manage my content. And you saw before Bruce was showing you the content. You can push your content and update your content to your app. Well, here now as a content author, I can go in and I can edit the content. It's brought in all the design for me. One of the things that's really cool about it is that I can come in here and I can move my components around. Let me do that. This is an image component. Okay. I can edit my text. Okay. And I can come in here and modify this content. I can delete it out if I want to, and I can go okay. So as a content author, I can come in and update it. As a designer, if I wanted to do that too, I could make those changes as well. Okay? And you can come in here and you can have all the functionality that you would have in a normal app. So if I wanted to come in and add more components, for example, I can do that too. So, you know, if I wanted to add a list or I wanted to add a mobile video, I can then click on my components, and I'll just do that here. Just grab this bit. I'll put it here. You know, I can come in and then I can start adding my new content as a content author. What's really nice about it is if I go back to my design and we just have a look at my design, you can see that I have multiple pages. So here's my other page as well. Okay, so it's brought in for me, and I'll just go to this one because I want to show my other page without having to refresh. You can see it's also got my sub page that's come in as well with that design. So from this point, you know, if I've got my videos there and I've got my content ready to go, I can then actually test that on my mobile device, and I'm just going to cycle through to my, okay. So you can see here that I've got my app through the PhoneGap Enterprise app. So, you know, we have an app you can download that connects to AEM. And this is what was a bit flaky, is because it connects through the Wi-Fi, and this, you know, when you're an Adobe person, our corp Wi-Fi can do some funny things. But you can connect through the Wi-Fi and you can update and refresh your app, and you can see it live. Now this is an actual app. So at this point I can go back into AEM and I can just download my file, or, you know, whatever I want to do, and then take that file and upload it to the App Store if that's what I want to do. Now, talking about some of the benefits of from a development side, and this is the bit that, you know, I think is really critical, is it's still editable. So one of the things you can do is you can go in and you can go in and still modify your custom. You can customize the code even further. So it's not about, you know, removing all bits of coding. I mean, it'd be nice to have that magic button that just does all that, like the design button on the keyboard, but maybe one day they'll invent that too. But it's really removing most of the coding of that rapid prototyping process. So if you create most of your components and, you know, you're reusing those components, so one of the big things is reusable components, that, I was talking to somebody and I asked them, well, what's the percentage of new components to reusable components? And they said 90%, right? So if you've got your components all set up there, then too much. You can go in, you can edit your components, you can add some extra core functionality or more business logic, whatever you want to do, and it's ready to go. But it saved you a whole lot of time. And when you think about how long it does take, like it can take, anywhere between, 3 to 4 weeks, and I actually know 4 and 6 months to produce, a really good app. So, it's a really time-consuming process, but this has probably taken out a majority of that process, right? The other thing is, and I'll go back to, so you can edit your content once you're through that process. So let me just minimize this or close this up. And I'll just click on this, go to the next one. Okay, so this is what's happening. It's a bit slow. Okay. Yeah, okay. So this is what's happening. So what we're doing is we're basically just taking all the design elements and we're generating the design content and metadata, and we're taking that through an API to the web server. And then those APIs create the components that we need. So in terms of, how it looks and how that works, a folder within Photoshop, for example, is then an image component, okay? So you can bring across and you can match those components, and they're still editable. All right, and it takes out most of the legwork for you. So, okay. So one of the things that was really important when when I was conceptualizing this, and I was conceptualizing with a developer or the engineer who helped build this proof of concept, was, some of the key things that were important for each person in that process. So he spoke about it from a developer and back-end developer's point of view, and I spoke about it from a front-end and design point of view, and what requirements that we need. So for a designer, it's design as usual. That, a lot of people don't want to learn new things because there's so much out there. So whatever they sort of can use in terms of their existing skill set is really important. It's really hard to get designers to use new tools unless it's really, really easy to pick up. So it was reusing what they know, not having to, a lot of designers don't code. They understand some of the web concepts, but a lot of them don't code. So it allows them to have more of that capability within this process. Reusing components. So from a design side, the design components that they use can go into libraries and they can share them. So it's really quick and easy to be able to put together a design template that matches what your mobile template will be. And for a designer, this is where they've never really, you get sent a link sometimes to a server, or you might be on a test app or whatever, but it's a lot harder for designers to actually see their design working. So this gives them more access to that. From a development point of view, it's really allowing you to custom code. So, we're not trying to change what you do in your own respective workflows, but we're trying to automate and connect them behind the scenes. So for a developer, it's really important. You want to go in there and tinker and, add things in as well after it's been generated. So you can do that. And also, you also sometimes do want to create your custom components. So you can still do that too, because that's a critical thing. Okay. And also, making sure that we're allowing for that mobile functionality to be part of that process as well. So, having all that, having that functionality included, not just wrapping it, but allowing you to have that mobile functionality included in terms of, what they're doing and interacting and the different Cordova APIs. it's really important that, you know, that is still there, all right? But it's automated process. So that is taking your designs straight from Photoshop and creating an app within like 27 seconds. That's probably the easiest app you've ever seen made. With PhoneGap Enterprise, AEM, and Photoshop. So if you do want to know more about how we progress in this development, email the PhoneGap, contact the PhoneGap team, either, you know, on the email, the blogs, feedback, whatever, or you speak to them. Or if you want to contact me on Twitter, you can do that too. And thank you.
Thank you. That was a cool demo.